Welcome to the Singer's Mind channel, where we discuss all things about neuroscience-based tools for singing and creativity. I'm Linda Bolero, Associate Professor of Voice at Berklee College of Music, longtime classical soprano, voice teacher and coach to professional touring artists and singers at every stage of their career, from opera to rock. We're talking today about inconsistent singing. One day, everything works. Your tone is free, high notes feel easy, and you feel connected to the music. The next day, the same passages feel unstable, your breath feels difficult, your throat feels tight, and no matter how much you try to fix it, nothing seems to work. Most singers assume this means their technique is unreliable, that they have some innate weakness, some lack of talent, or they just don't get it. But often voice mechanics aren't the source of inconsistent singing. The source is a shift in the attention system of the brain. Attention isn't concentration. It's more like a spotlight in the brain, and it can be conscious or unconscious. Singers tend to think if your attention is off, you're lazy, you lack self-discipline, or you have some other fundamental flaw. But if you think about singing from the point of view of cognitive processes and how they work, you'll find out that you're not flawed, and there are practical solutions that don't include judgment or self-criticism. Many people are surprised to learn that the primary driver of attention is emotion or even mood or state like hunger. Attention is directed by neurotransmitters that send and receive signals, causing the neurons to fire off. In the case of movements, the signals are sent to the muscles, and the muscles then send feedback signals to the brain via the nervous system. So there is a continuous loop anytime we move, whether we're taking a dish off the shelf in the kitchen or singing. Most of the time, your voice isn't inconsistent. Your attention is. Let's take a closer look at the system. Singing is an extremely precise coordination of muscles and sensory feedback. It's a highly complex motor skill. Over the decades, there's been a great deal of neuroscience research about motor skill learning and performance. The theories and models have been evolving rapidly in recent years, so we'll discuss that in a few minutes. But first, let's take a closer look at the model I just showed you. Anytime we move, the brain calculates what to do based on information. For coordination to work, attention spotlights sensory data, hearing, physical sensation, and the memory of those senses. Neurotransmitters receive and send signals to move, and the movements are refined by feedback from the muscles. This is why I like to say that everyone teaches themselves how to sing. Voice teachers are just fancy traffic cops. When negative emotion enters the picture, like frustration, anxiety, self-criticism, embarrassment, the brain shifts attention away from those sensory signals and toward thoughts like, is this going to work? Or do I sound okay? Do I sound good? And when attention is drawn away from sensory data, the brain loses the information it needs to coordinate the voice. We'll see in a minute what happens instead. This is why the body mechanics are not the cause or the solution to inconsistent singing. It's the brain's calculation system about what information matters at the moment. You may have already heard for the brain, what matters most is survival. So we'll see how that plays into it. At every moment, your brain is receiving enormous amounts of information, both unconscious and conscious. The sound of your voice, the vibration of your bones and tissues from the sound wave, respiration pressure in your torso, feedback from muscle movements, the acoustics of the room, the space around you, and everything in your external environment. The music and the lyrics you're singing, of course. The brain continuously calculates what's the most important. In the everyday world, that calculation is driven by emotion, mood, or state. When things feel safe and engaging, attention networks spotlight sensory information, sound, sensation, spatial position. That's when singing feels easy and coordinated. But when emotions, like the fear of missing a note, or the frustration of something not sounding the way you want pop in, the analytical system of your brain takes over and attention shifts away from sensation and toward threat detection and control. Why is this happening? What am I doing wrong? How do I fix this? The moment attention shifts into negative or analytical thinking, threat detection dominates and the singing voice becomes less coordinated. Muscular effort increases, like pulling up throat muscles or biting while singing. And the data from these movements sends feedback to the brain, and the brain interprets that as signs of danger. So increased muscle effort is interpreted by the brain as more danger in the area. You get stuck in a loop of unstable and unreliable singing. So what singers often experience as inconsistent technique is frequently something else entirely. It's this shift in the attention system of the brain. One moment, attention is anchored in sensation and sound. The next moment, it's pulled away by worry, judgment, or trying too hard. And that shift changes how the voice functions, even when you've done everything right, like training, managing allergies, managing acid reflux if you have it, fully memorizing, eating, and sleeping as best you can. By the way, if you have questions about any of those, drop your questions in the comments so I can answer them. You know, probably every singer from beginner to professional can intuitively recognize this experience I'm talking about. But understanding how it actually works and having practical tools to deal with it makes the difference between scary singing and joyful singing. The good news is you can learn how to direct your attention, even on days when you're stressed, tired, frustrated, or worried. The secret lies in intention. We saw this before. Notice emotion isn't the driver here. This doesn't mean we don't have emotions. In fact, the opposite. Emotions still have a vital role, especially since we're talking about singing and music. We'll go into details of that in part 3 session of this inconsistent singing pathway. But the driver of successful motor skill performance, like singing, is a higher cognitive function, planning, strategy, and reasoning. These are innate cognitive abilities that everyone has. Those abilities make it possible to set an intention for what we want to do. By the way, this is called a higher function because of the position in the brain. Emotions, reflexes, movements, those neurons are located deep in the middle of the brain, while thinking and planning and collecting sensory data from the environment are located in the top or the front of the brain. It's useful sometimes to know where things are mapped in the anatomy of your brain because it gives us a sense of their value. And value becomes important in some other behaviors that affect our singing. Remember, nothing in the brain or body is linear. We're talking about complex systems that rely on feedback loops, memories, and associations. All of these are, of course, part of learning too, which we'll cover in part 2, where we look at dopamine's role in your singing. But anyways, what do these models do for you and your singing? Inconsistent singing becomes consistent when you have a clear intention. When you set the goal in your mind and imagination, the rest of your cognition follows, even your emotions and moods. But there's a catch. The intention has to be clear and measurable. Remember the enormous amount of information your brain is using to calculate what to do next? Your intention has to be clear enough to cut through that noise. For example, I want to sing this really great is too general. Your brain isn't able to calculate what is great and what is beautiful. It doesn't know how good you sound when you sing. But if, for example, you say, I want to sing with even volume, your brain has sensory systems that can evaluate volume. So this works. Of course, in music, you need a wide range of dynamics, but that's a different kind of evaluation. Even volume means not automatically getting louder or softer at particular points in your range without a reason, whether that's music or scales. As soon as you change the volume unconsciously or without a reason, you have changes in the coordination of your system. Another example of an intention that's clear and measurable. I want the high notes to be connected to the rest of my voice. The brain can sense sudden changes in the musculature and the position and posture of your body and voice. So it can evaluate that. This is related to even volume, but it goes one step further. Your high notes will stand out because they are a different acoustic package, but not because they are automatically a different tone quality or automatically louder or softer than the rest of your voice. Setting an intention that's clear and measurable is significantly more compatible with how cognition works than thinking about mechanics. For example, what to do with your jaw or how to breathe. Look, I'm a highly technique-trained teacher, so I train singers with approaches that are time-tested vocal pedagogy, but I use them to exploit how people, brains, and minds function, rather than giving directions to move a particular body part, which takes you away from actually the way your brain works. We've been learning so far from a basic model for motor skills, but an extraordinary team of scientists recently reviewed the vast body of research about how the brain functions in motor skills. They came up with a new model that fits perfectly with the model of setting your intention to develop consistent singing. They found that the models for motor skill learning and performance that have been the standard for several decades weren't flexible enough to describe the complex system that people seem to be engaging. Instead, they proposed the 3 R's: reasoning, refinement, and retrieval. This doesn't throw out the work of the past. It's just building on all the models we have about motor skill learning and performance in a way that makes it more of a system instead of a linear and clearly black and white setup. This is a great model for your singing and how to become a more consistent singer. Reasoning is the process of developing your intention. In fact, intention may always be there, at least unconsciously. In experts, the intention occurs very fast, almost immediately. And experts may not even be able to verbalize what they did. Beginner or early stage singers will need deliberate practice to develop the planning and strategy needed for consistent singing. Refinement is the sensory motor loop. We already looked at this slide. This is not changing, but it is becoming a little bit more evolved. So we know that the system isn't linear, as I said, and it's a continuous feedback loop that involves automatic processes, but also planning and strategy. It's continuously happening while you're singing. Retrieval is the stage of motor learning when you can sing the way you want in different environments and conditions. You can retrieve and reconstruct the activity, the motor skill, the movements in your body. Your brain is able to retrieve the signals and processes it used before. It can restructure your singing, reconstruct your singing every time. With these models, you can change the way you think about your singing. Instead of hyper-focusing on a mechanical solution like how to move your jaw, how to breathe, or position your tongue, you can develop a view how your brain, mind, and body processes information. We'll talk about inconsistent singing in the next 2 sessions, where we take a deep dive on how your learning may be a root cause, including practice tips. And then in part 3, we'll talk about how your performance anxiety could be causing inconsistent singing and what you can do about it. If these topics resonate with you, click subscribe and sign up for the free 5-day email mini course. The link is in the description. And remember, if you want to change your singing, change your mind.